Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Global Book Network, the show we shine a spotlight on authors who are doing provoking things. I'm Flippo Boyce, and I'm honored to be speaking once again with the author of Tipping Point for a Hollow Earth, Azimuth and Sagan, backed by prophecy of a polar hole shift to Europe. It's Ruth Leedy Carr. How's it going, ma'am?
Oh, it's fine. I think more and more people are becoming aware of this issue. I don't know if they agree or
Well, that was actually my first question. I mean, I've seen your work. I've seen you appear on other podcasts. How has been the sentiment of your work over time?
well, I think some of the reviews are positive. In other words, people like to have their settled views challenged, and makes them think. They enjoyed that challenge.
Yeah. So let's take a step back. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the work, the very nature of the idea that the Earth being hollow must have been really interesting the first time you came across this information. Just as a bit of an overview, just review when that moment was for you.
Well, um, the first time I heard about it, it was in a conversation between my husband and a friend of his, and the friend said that some people believe that UFOs come and go from a hole in the pole. And I just thought that was so absurd. I just thought, what will they come up with next? And then when I first came across the book, The Hollow Earth, in a used bookstore, I did not buy it at the first opportunity. I just didn't think it was worth thinking about.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I went back to it and was glad that I did. Glad.
Right. And what was the moment? Was it kind of like planting a seed and you were like up one day going, no, wait a minute, there has to be some truth to this? Or was it like another moment that's supplanted or
Well, the moment when it seems most plausible, it says in the Hollow Earth in the book that the light of the internal sun shines up through the polar holes and is reflected in the sky.
Mhm.
And that just made me remember, it just reminded me of the prophecies of Christ and of Edgar Casey about light in the clouds. And I thought, oh, the reason that the prophecy says light in the clouds is that the light is coming up from below and can only be seen when it bounces off clouds or, some the atmosphere in the sky. That's the light you're going to see when the polar hole moves. So that's when I saw a connection between these prophecies and the Hollow Earth theory.
So talk to me. What exactly is the shape of this hole? How large is it? Are there multiple holes?
I don't know exactly. I There's a hole in the south and a hole in the north caused by centrifugal force of the Earth spinning because the whole shell being in orbit around the central sun, uh, you can't have orbiting matter be stationary still at the axis. It has to be moving to
Hmm.
be in orbit. And a spheroidal planetary nebula is the same shape. It's spheroidal, but it has the hole at the top and the bottom because the matter that's orbiting the shell is dust and gas, and it just can't remain stationary at the axis. So there has to be a hole.
Yeah. And as the adventurer side of me, was there ever an expedition to go out there and check that out? And from your end, would you want to go visit, or was it kind of like a thing where you don't want to open Pandora's box?
Who's kind of an outdoorsman, a hiker, and everything, told me that I should go up and see if there is a hole in the North Pole. And I thought, well, not only was I not physically fit for that, but you know, uh, uh, I wouldn't be believed any more than the other people who have come back and said that there was a hole in the pole,
Yeah.
or said that they saw a sun up there during the time of winter darkness. Um, these types of stories just haven't resonated, and my story wouldn't be.
Uh, I wouldn't know. I think when you see something that's so provocative, there are going to be someone to say, I don't think that's true. But I do think I would be entertained wherever happens if you had an expedition and took a couple of cameras with you and you journaled while you did it. But that's maybe me being selfish, right?
Um, February 25th, 1992, in the tabloid The Sun, said scientists find tropical paradise inside the Earth, and the big headline said there's a hole in the pole. And then another side headline said UFOs come from inner space, not outer space. It's funny though, the story didn't say anything about UFOs.
Right.
So I don't know who came up with that headline, but an explorer, a Danish explorer, claimed that he had been.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not, and of course, in the ancient times, people believed the Earth was hollow, and there were adventurers back then too who explored the far north.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You know, when the book was written, the latest book, Tipping Point for Hollow Earth, has been written this year until now. Has there really been any updates or changes or things that you discovered between now and then that you wanted to share?
And question, there were 2 points that I should have made in both of these books that I don't think I made. One was that in the article in December 1989, Scientific American by Jeremy Bloxham and David Gubbins, and the title was The Evolution of the Earth's Magnetic Field. They had predicted that at the present rate of decay, the Earth's magnetic field should reverse itself in 1,500 years. But I had forgotten
Hmm.
the hotspots that come up around Indonesia, come up periodically, that if another hotspot was to arise near Indonesia,
Hmm.
that the addition of the additional, well, it would be the third hotspot, would be enough reverse magnetism to overpower the main field, which is actually getting weaker anyway. And at that point, the North Magnetic Pole would start wandering erratically. That's what the textbooks say, wandering erratically, and the same with the South Magnetic Pole. And they would eventually settle in different, in the opposite hemisphere from before, but not in the same exact spot as the previous magnetic poles. So, um, uh, at that point, the solar wind would be deflected and funneled to those new magnetic poles. And we know the solar wind is very much associated with the axis because it forms the aurora caused by the solar wind, forms a ring around the axis, in effect, defining the axis. Um, and so that's what would happen if the magnetic pole migrate to opposite new positions in opposite hemispheres. You're going to have the solar wind impacting the planet differently from before.
Right.
But I've made that point, before. But the main point that I should have mentioned before was that could be triggered immediately, according to Bloxham and Cubbins. And the other point that I should have mentioned was that 80 million years ago, there was a reversal of the Earth's magnetic field, which caused the Earth to roll, as CBS put it, on January 20th, 2000. Um, and that the latitude of the Washington, D.C. area changed. Well, the latitude is your distance from the equator, which
Hmm.
means that doesn't mean that Washington, D.C. moved.
Right.
So if the equator moved, the pole moved. And the real question is, why did CBS not use the term axis shift? But when they said the Earth rolled, they must have meant it did something unusual because we know the Earth rolls every. They were trying to soft pedal the issue of the axis shift. But there was enough information in the story to tell you that there was an axis shift 80 million years ago as a result of a reversal of Earth's magnetic field, which is a point that the scientists are not making today. Now, the scientist who was interviewed for the book on Edgar Casey by Jess Sturm, Edgar Casey, the Sweet Prophet,
Hmm.
he spoke anonymously, and he did say that the axis would shift as a result of the coming reversal of Earth's magnetic field, which he said was overdue. Caused me to start investigating
Yeah.
the geomagnetic field reversal was this anonymous statement by a geologist. But you have a hard time finding anyone going on the record saying that a geomagnetic field reversal causes an axis shift. But there you had in that CBS story saying, well, yes, it did happen 80 million years ago. And then at the end of it, Dan Rather says, oh, it's a good thing we're not explaining that today. I'm pretty sure he said that.
Hmm.
he, as if he didn't know, and maybe he didn't know that it was that we're on the cusp, on the brink of it today,
Right.
because of the reverse, because of the decline of the magnetic field over the past 2,500 years. We're really ready. And there's a couple of experts who have actually said it could not just Bloxham and Gubbins, but there's another one, Garrett for sure, in his book Cosmic Catastrophes, said in 1978 that the reversal could begin in 50 to 150 years. And 50 years from 1978 is 2028. So there is an expert who says it could start soon. Um, but I don't think he specified that the axis would shift. What they do is they say, well, we think it's a catastrophe because we've got fossil records showing that certain species disappeared at the time of a geomagnetic field reversal. And they think, gee, it must be some kind of a catastrophe, as if they had no idea what caused it. But I think they know. They just, you know, they know that it's not safe to say.
Right. Well, the thing that there was aspects of that did not make the book was interesting. Was that a situation of just not having the time to develop it, or did you wanted to wait and get more information? Like, why did it not make?
Didn't make the book was that I had forgotten. There are so many details in my research that it's easy to for a detail to slip into the back of your mind or just to be forgotten altogether.
Mhm.
And that's what comes of doing a project alone. I have no collaborators, and I don't have any editors going over my work and saying, "Hey, what about such and so point that you made last year?" You know, and and uh, and I spend a lot of my time studying riddles from Isaac Asimov and Carl Sagan,
Right.
and that causes me to forget some of the hard facts of the geology and the astronomy and everything, because I'm just
Yeah. Well, I mean, you raise a good point. I mean, this is a very complex project and idea, and you are going about it alone. Do you wish to have that delegated to other people, or is it something like you took ownership of and going, it's my job to make sure the truth comes out the way I like to see it?
people will give me feedback, yes, and editors. Well, there was some editorial work done by my first publisher, Page Publisher, Page Publishing, on Polar Whole Light in Europe's Clouds. They reworded some of my sentences. They removed the word which and put the word that in its place. Frequently did that, and a few other things where they felt that I hadn't expressed things very well. But what would really be helpful would be to have an editor who had studied the subject and knew the material and could remind me of.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand that. I mean, as a writer myself, sometimes you get kind of like in your own head, right? There's so many aspects and things that connect, and it's always a puzzle going. So I totally understand that.
Last year, he made this point in 5 different newsletters, perhaps, and nobody seemed to respond to it. You tend to think, well, that point has that causes you to forget about it. When it's a point that needs to be brought up again and again.
Right. Well, for the interest of the other side of it, like with if you're waiting for peer review or some people to chime in, are there aspects or theories that are being left off or being held back while they're being researched, or what are some things that we haven't even seen yet when it comes to the idea of polar holes?
Um, some things we haven't seen yet regarding polar holes.
Yeah, well, regarding your research, sometimes in the interest of making it simple to us to understand, who may not understand how deep this rabbit hole goes, you might want to.
The things that people don't understand about this issue would be seen if they would read the old books. Marshall Gardner's book, Journey to the Earth's Interior, or Have the Poles Really Been Discovered? And then William Reed's book, Phantom of the Poles. Both of these authors, well, one was written around 1905 and the other one was written in 1920. They had access to many records of explorers, which we have lost track of. Um, and they would say so and so discovered um, tracks of foxes leading north, or they saw gulls flying through the sky, coming from the north or going towards the north, and and the water got warmer as they went north. The water became the ice melted, and or else it was a winter night, and yet we saw a dull red sun in the sky. What was it? Was it a reflection of something? Was it a mock? They call it a mock sun or a mirage of the sun. And all these types of reports have been forgotten because I don't know why, but uh, that's a lot of background material that would serve to make the Hollow Earth theory plausible.
Right.
Maybe not to prove it, but to just make it something you could consider.
Yeah. When you had mentioned that in your spare time or downtime, do you even have spare time with all of this? Yeah, you are encouraged to decipher some of the puzzles from Isaac Asimov, and I want to know what those riddles look like to someone who may not be initiated to what Asimov has done.
Well, he he provided some really easy ones. There was one where he did an obvious riddle on his wife's name. Her first name is Janet, and the first name of this fictional character was Tejan, which is perfect anagram of Janet. And then the character's last name was Hopkins, which is the perfect anagram of his wife's maiden name, Jepson, Janet Jepson. And so he puts well, it was a three-part name. The third name was Lih. So he puts this character in his final novel, and it's just a sign to the reader, hey, I can do anagrams. And there are two additional anagrams in his final novel, which is Forward the Foundation. One is an anagram of the word camel and LAMEC, and the definition was a beast of burden. In other words, telling you that the plot will give you a hint as to what the answer to the riddle is. So if a llama is a beast of burden, and you can see it is respelled, it can spell camel, and you know a camel is a beast of burden, then you know he's done an anagram. And the same thing, he did it with something called the Greti, Greti, an animal which is dangerous to ride because if you fall off, it might eat you. And that's an anagram of tiger.
Wow.
Which, the idea of riding a tiger, that's kind of a shorthand term for taking a risk.
Yeah.
There's a couple of ones. There's a name, Homer Mallow, which is pluralized in his 1982 novel Foundation's Edge. And so when you add the S to Homer Mallow, it's a perfect anagram of Mars hollow. And hollow is spelled perfectly. So if you go through and you discover some of these easy anagrams, and Carl Sagan did a couple ones that are pretty easy. One called Tyrone Free. This character was a prisoner and obviously not free. So you think, okay, not. And you can see that the word not can be taken from the first name of Tyrone. And that makes it very easy to solve this. That takes up all the letters, the word Tyrone free. So that very short anagram proves to you that Carl Sagan also able to do anagrams.
Yeah. And
so when you find a couple of short anagrams like this, then you start working on the longer names. And it just takes it. Well, I started making some progress on this in 2010. And so it's been 15 years. That's longer than it took me to get through school. But if you work on something for a long, long time, and of course there are going to be many failures, you start to get a feeling of, I sure wish there was somebody who would tell me you solved this correctly or you didn't. But as you work on it for a long time, you start to make some progress even without that help. And so I've gotten to the point. I've recently found a couple of anagrams that mention the names of seven different European countries. Those countries are England, Ireland, Denmark, France, Holland, Finland, Germany. Did I say seven?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One character name along with his home planet. So that was Ferdinand Fekut Lockmania from Fekut and the Courts. And I found the seven names of European countries, and I found the word doomed. I found the word geomagnetic field in there, geomagnetic field change, and this discovery very excited. But this morning I found another anagram that does exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
Mentions those same seven countries and geomagnetic field and everything. So, but this is much more advanced. I wasn't capable of noticing something like that in my first couple of years of working on anagrams. So, um, and then there's a couple of character names that both can say hollow planet Earth will be reborn. And that's from perfectly formal and cosmology.
Yeah.
So to have two characters, well, first I noticed planet Earth, hollow planet Earth in each name, and it's spelled correctly. And I thought, well, this can't be a coincidence. And then I noticed, well, all right, planet Earth be hollow in each name. But when I looked at it more carefully, a couple of years later, I thought there's more. There are more similarities here. You can get polar whole from each name. Um, and so there are other examples where you can find two character names that give exactly the same message from Asimov. And that's the way that he uses to confirm.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I've learned every time we have you on the show, every time I talk to you, whether offline or online, I've learned so much. And I really want people to check out the book, Tipping Point for Hollow Earth. It's available now on Amazon. But before you close this out, is there any message that you want to share to anyone who's watching this right now?
Particular, let's see, my website is ruthleedycarr.com, and I'm on Facebook. Uh, Ruth, Ruth Leedy Carr. I think that's all there is to it. That's my social media page. Um, I just hope people will realize that this is a
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very interesting this to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Well, figuratively speaking, it's not really a rabbit hole, but you know what I mean. So, always good to learn for that. So the book's available now on Amazon, wherever you get fine books. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully have you back again soon as your research evolves.